On this episode of Local Film Talk, we're chatting with the director of Unverified, Bradley Bethel. To be the first to get this and our other episodes, subscribe to the Local Film Talk YouTube channel. And if you just want to listen to the show, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Local Film Talk. This is the show where we talk to local filmmakers about the projects they're working on, hopefully get some advice you can use for your own projects. I'm Bob Walters.
And I'm Conrad Arnold of the Triangle Film Community. And, Bob, just last week, we had a meetup.
We did. A very successful meetup. Lots of people showed.
It was cool, man. There was a lot of people who showed up that, it's either been a long time for them since they had come out last, or it was their very first time. So, we just really want to thank everybody who came out because it was a hell of a meetup. And, the meetups aren't worth anything if people don't show. So when people show, it's great.
So what we got coming up in the future, that's the past. What are we looking forward to?
I think it's about time people really start getting those Film Spark submissions in, because this is the last week of early deadline. When Sunday rolls around, the price goes up.
Last chance to get the early bird discount, folks.
That's right.
We need lots of films. We need short films. We need feature films. We need documentaries, comedy, drama, everything. If it's a film made in North Carolina, we want to check it out because we want to have a huge block of programming. We got to fill 4 days of screening time. So
if you got a picture that moves, including that tattoo of the mermaid on your bicep that you can make dance, we want it in.
So yeah, absolutely. If you have something, go ahead and try to get in before that early bird deadline. If not, keep hacking away at it, keep working, and as soon as you're done, submit it to Film Spark because we want to show it.
That's right. And speaking of film festivals, I heard a rumor that there's one on Saturday.
Eastern North Carolina Film Festival, which we always have to mention our sponsors. My Dumb Face over here, 30-minute short film that'll be screening there, and also our buddy Michael Howard's feature film, Where We're Meant to Be. Thank you, both you guys, for sending us a poster and helping support the show and giving us the opportunity to plug your project. If anybody out there would like us to plug their project, just send us an 11x17 poster, and it might end up on the wall back here behind me, and we'll be talking about your project. But you didn't. So right now, we're talking about My Dumb Face and Where We're Meant to Be and how you can go see them this weekend at the Eastern North Carolina Film Festival. Along with a lot of other great things, including Fever Dreams by director Rob Underhill and written by Al Julian.
I feel like we should just clarify. Fever Dreams is not part of the Eastern NC Film Festival.
Oh, shit, my bad.
We're just awkwardly segging into our screening for next month. So yes, May 19th, which is a Thursday, 7 p.m., free screening at the Cary Theater. We are showing the feature film Fever Dreams, which is an anthology kind of horror thriller film featuring three tales written by Al Julian. And, also we're proud to announce that before the feature, we're going to be screening a short, and we have Chris Moore's Knobgoblins, which is,
award-winning short, has been to quite a few festivals and racked up a number of awards.
It's done very well on the festival circuit this past year. So we're excited about being able to show that to a local audience here. Oh, and I almost forgot. There is one other event going on. If you remember, we had our episode about Wilmington on Fire, and the trailer for that will be screening on the 29th. At Trophy on Maywood, when Raleigh Film Underground has its first show, which they are going to screen the Robert Townsend film Hollywood Shuffle.
Okay, very cool. Congratulations to those guys on finally getting their first show.
Yeah,
let's
it's
see if
cool.
we can check that out.
It's a free show. It's going to be cool. And
yeah, I'll have to get a link in the show notes, hopefully. I'll try to remember to throw that in there.
Yeah. So Emily, who runs Raleigh Film Underground, she's really interested in showing trailers and stuff of local films. So, start cutting trailers of your films, man. There's an audience.
Yeah, just trying to get the word out there. So if you got something to show us, hit us up, localfilmtalk@gmail.com, or what's the Triangle Film Community email address?
Man,
oh shit, we got no email address.
No, we actually do have an email. I just rarely ever check it. triangle.video@gmail.com.
Yeah, after you said you don't check it, be sure to send your email there. He might check it one day.
Yeah, I might get around to it.
Localfilmtalk@gmail.com. It goes to my phone. I check it every day. Maybe once Conrad starts checking his email regularly, you can start sending it to him.
Yeah, I've only got like a skajillion email addresses. I can't even keep track of. After I add 5 to Gmail app, it says you shouldn't add more than 5. It makes the app work all wonky. And then it annoys me every time with this message. So I just finally turn off.
They say you might need to focus your life, Conrad, and whittle down some of your email addresses.
No, they all have.
Don't tell me how to live my life, Google.
Yeah,
do what I want.
They got specific purposes. I got the Film Spark email address. I got my personal. I got my business. I got what the hell else, man?
This is the part of our show where Conrad lists all his email addresses.
This is part of the show where Conrad lists all of his horrible flaws,
and then we cut it down into its own little thing, and we release it as an experimental film. But no, actually, this is the part of the show where we introduce our guest for the evening. It's Bradley Bethel. You may have seen him not too long ago. The other week, he was the producer of Son of Clowns, Evan Kidd's directorial feature film directorial debut. And so if you go to our YouTube page, the Local Film Talk YouTube page, you can see our coverage of the premiere of Son of Clowns. And Bradley was one of the people we talked to. He also directed a feature-length documentary about the UNC academic scandal. He was actually very close to that thing and had some unique insights to it. So he took about a year off, quit his job, got a kick-ass Kickstarter going, asked for $50,000, almost tripled that, and took a year or a few years of his life and made this really kick-ass documentary, Unverified, that you guys should check out. But here in this episode, he's going to give us some behind-the-scenes insights, talk a little bit about his process and some of the pitfalls he ran into. And, something I know you guys always love is a few tips and tricks to actually get interest in your Kickstarter, make sure you hit your goal, and then go a little bit over. So I know you guys will be interested in hearing that. Yes. So without further ado, we hope you guys enjoy our interview with the director of Unverified, Mr. Bradley Bethel.
Yeah, exactly. I came to UNC in the fall of 2011, which basically just as the shit was hitting the storm, just as the coverage, the talk of scandal, of this particular scandal was starting to come out. And these classes were known as paper classes. So this is the paper class scandal, the UNC class scandal. Okay. And the paper classes were done by the time that I got to UNC, but they were just becoming known in the media when I got there. And so I was never implicated in any way in this scandal, but it was my colleagues were implicated.
Because they've been around for a couple years more, yeah. Hey,
yeah, and then,
you got lucky being the new guy on that job.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and it's an important point because about my colleagues, because the two in particular whom my film focuses on, they got to UNC in 2006, which was several years after these paper classes started. Mm-hmm. And so when they got there, they learned about these paper classes, and they looked into them, and they said, "What's going on here? Is this okay?" Got the sort of information from deans that this was an issue of faculty having academic freedom or their own autonomy to conduct the classes as they should, and so the counselors, they took the deans for their word. They made sure that they knew that there were non-athletes in the classes also. To their knowledge, these classes weren't being set up just for athletes. So they felt like they did their due diligence to make sure that everything was okay. But in the end, as what often happens when there's a scandal at a big, powerful institution, they as low-level employees, exactly, they as low-level employees took the blame, and and the people at the top, sort of got off scot-free, and and so that's what my film is about. Well, I should say it's about a little bit more than that, because it's also about the way that I feel the news media sensationalized these. I mean, I really started out making the film specifically to address that issue, the issue of media sensationalism, and then along the way I realized that, well, there's more to this story than media sensationalism. There's also the fault of the university administration for scapegoating low-level employees also. And so in the end, Unverified, the untold story behind the UNC scandal, it's about the powerful versus the powerless. We were very committed to making an honest documentary. We were very committed to I had my beliefs. There were definitely things I wanted to accomplish, but I also wanted to see where the journey took me, and it took me in an unexpected direction. It was unexpected for me. It was unexpected for a lot of people who had initially supported the film. But fortunately, the vast majority of the people who supported the film said that they were, the basic sentiment has been that they were pleasantly surprised. It wasn't what they expected, but they thought it was better than what they expected. And so I think that's one thing that separates Unverified from most advocacy documentaries, is that there is genuine development and growth in the film. I don't just stick to the position that I started out with.
Okay, so you would so you would call this an advocacy documentary. That's better than my term, activist. Are you a fan of that genre? Have you seen many movies in that line? What are there any out there you would recommend, or any that influenced you when you made this one?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would call it an advocacy doc. I mean, I guess that's a good question. I've never been posed with this before. Because really,
you definitely have a point of view. It's not objective. You're trying to follow the evidence as it comes to you and not be biased.
Yeah.
But you have a perspective, certainly.
Well, yeah, and I think.
Sorry, what was that, Conrad?
All documentary has an agenda to it. There's no such really objective documentary, and all too often people confuse journalism with documentary.
Yes.
We need to think of documentary as basically just nonfiction film. Every nonfiction book
has
an agenda to it, a POV to it. So that's the lens we need to have when we're talking about documentary. It's not journalism. And somewhere in the last 15 years, people started thinking documentary was journalism, but it's not. Journalism is documentary has an agenda.
Well put.
That's right, and that's exactly what I was about to say. This issue came up. This issue actually comes up every year at the Full Game Documentary Film Festival, in at least one of the panel discussions or one of the Q&As after one of the films. And this year, when it came up this year, it was during a panel discussion, and it was an audience member was arguing to the panel that documentary filmmakers should see themselves as journalists, and every panel member was adamant in saying no, documentary filmmakers are not journalists. And one, very concisely said, film is a subjective medium, and that goes even for documentary film. And so the responsibility of the documentary filmmaker is not to be objective, but to be transparent and consistent in their point of view. And so in my film, you see from the very beginning what my point of view is. I don't make any attempts to hide point of view by any means, and so it's just being transparent, and then and being reasonable and consistent in presenting that point of view. One of the things I hope viewers take away in general from Unverified is that we all need to be more critical media consumers, and they should be critical of my film too.
You basically decided to just tell your story of the journey of you going out and putting all this information together. Is that the way you intended to do it from the start, or is that something you just found along the way was the best way to convey this information to people?
Oh, I guess a little bit of both. I mean, we definitely, like I said, we wanted to make an honest documentary, and we said this is going to be a journey. This film is going to be a journey, and we're going to document my journey. In documentary film, editors are the unsung heroes. They really are,
absolutely.
because with narrative, editing still takes a lot of skill, and editors need to be praised in narrative. But in narrative, you already have the story is written in the form script.
Right.
In documentary, the editor becomes a big part of the storytelling, because it's the editor who sits down with all of that footage and then tries to make sense of it. And
right, you have your footage, but you don't have the story to begin with. You got to go and
exactly.
find that.
I was really lucky to have committed, talented editors. Ned Phillips is one of the editors. He's a local guy out of Durham. Does a lot of cinematography and editing. And the other editor is a guy named Sebastian Diaz, who's out of New York. And and we had some long days editing in post-production. So that's what I'd say people who don't work in documentary should take away from is when you see documentaries you like, understand that that documentary had a good most likely had a good editor who was behind that.
So how much freedom did you give your editors with the footage?
A lot, because this was my first film, and I really had no idea what I was doing. and
we never do. We've been doing the show for a while. We still have no idea what we're doing. You never know what you're doing.
The best decision that I made was at the very beginning, which was I need to surround myself with people who know what they're doing, and I need to make this a collaborative effort. But the way it worked out is I kind of came up with an outline, sort of storyboarded what the story would be, and then I kind of handed it to them and said, here's what I want. And they would try certain things, and they would say, well, we tried that and it doesn't work. We've got to come up with something new. Or they'd say, that didn't work, but we tried this. What do you think of this? And I would say, oh, I think that works. Let's go with that. Or I'd say, no, that doesn't really work for what I was trying. So it was very much a back and forth process, and they were great, because they took that freedom and they ran with it, and again, we just working collaboratively, and that's what I think I will always enjoy the most about film, is the collaboration. I remember talking to a filmmaker at Full Frame a couple of years ago, and she was the director of a film called From This Day Forward, and I told her that I was doing a film that was very personal, because her film is very personal, and one of the things she said is, if you're doing a really personal film, it's really important to have editors who can be kind of outside perspectives and kind of point out things that you might not see. One of the things is sometimes you've got to kill your darlings, as they say. There are things
Smith was the one who said that.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because there were plenty of times there was something I really loved, some footage, some shot, or some point that I thought was really great, and my editors, kind of showed me, or like, dude, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. And so I had to kill it, because they were right. They were right. It didn't work, and so that's why I think that it's really beneficial to a documentary film director to have an editor who can be that outside perspective.
I was curious what it's like. You must have known from the get-go, the story has been told in the national media one way, and here you are coming with a different perspective. Obviously, most of the organizations involved are probably not going to be happy. You're probably not going to get a lot of cooperation. What advice do you have for people who want to do a documentary on a subject where some of the principal people or organizations involved may not want to cooperate?
That's a great question, and that's tough. For me, a year before I started production, and before I even knew I was going to do a film, I started blogging about the topic, about the issue, the situation, the scandal. And I was offering a different perspective on my blog, and so I was able to kind of demonstrate through my blog where I was coming from, which kind of assured a number of people whom I was able to interview, that I wasn't doing gotcha journalism or anything like that. They're able to look at what I had done and say, okay, here's the perspective he's coming from. I think trust sharing my perspective with this person. And now I still wasn't able to get everyone that I wanted. And in fact, that actually, in another way, was against me, because I did want to interview some journalists. And no professional journalist would give me an on-camera interview, and part of that was because I'd been very critical of the news media in my blog in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
not to name names, but you named a couple names, and I'm sure they weren't happy about it.
right. And that's one thing. I mean, I look back at some of my criticism of the media through blogging, and I think I went too far in certain cases. And I regret some of the kind of snide, takes that I've had on some journalists in the past. And so
I'm sure most people with a Twitter account can relate to that feeling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so it's been part of my growth and development too. I've been trying to develop through this whole process. But to get back to your question, somehow you just have to demonstrate to those interview subjects or the subjects you want to follow that you're going to represent their perspective fairly. Right. Now, the challenge is, I think,
and you did have some people that you interviewed who, their specific story in the documentary is how their interviews with the general media were misconstrued and edited in ways that they didn't think represented what they had actually said.
Yeah.
How do you deal with, I mean, they give you a long interview specifically about the topic, about how their words were edited to say something different than what they said, and you then have to edit that interview into your documentary, basically do the same thing, hopefully not misinterpret their words. Is that a fine line to dance?
Man, yeah, I think it's something that is of the utmost importance for a documentary filmmaker to think about. And for us, it was, for every interview that we included in the film, I mean, almost every interview lasted at least an hour, but we only include a few minutes, if that, sometimes a minute or two.
Right.
And so we had to ask ourselves, what is the character of this person? And how can we make sure that we accurately reflect the character of this person. But I've heard from other filmmakers, specifically Amir Bar-Lev. He's a very accomplished filmmaker. He did the film Happy Valley, which is about the Jerry Sandusky scandal at Penn State. He did another film called The Tillman Story, which was about the Pat Tillman sort of scandal.
One, yeah.
Both excellent. He's one of the filmmakers I admire the most. I mean, Unverified is nothing like his films, but I look up to him and his films a lot. And I've heard him talk about this very thing, and that he tries very much to make sure that he is presenting his characters fairly, true to their character, and sometimes that might not be exactly how the characters themselves imagine themselves. But from what I've heard, for the most part, everyone he's ever represented in the film feels like he's done a pretty, even if they didn't agree with everything or every way that. What's that?
That he was fair to them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think it's really an important issue that documentary filmmakers need to think. And the reason I think it's important is because, I guess it just goes back to being transparent about one's point of view. Like in my film, I was very transparent from the very beginning that I'm doing this film because I knew the people involved, and I believe that they were misrepresented and scapegoated, and so of course I'm going to present them in the best light. But I still wanted to present them accurately and true to their character, and there were journalists who we wanted to interview, and I was prepared to make sure that if we did get those interviews with journalists, I was prepared to make sure that we were just as committed to present them, to representing them fairly, even if it worked against. And by the way, I mean, this happened. I did mention earlier that there was this one interview where I kind of got my ass kicked, and
right.
And that was important to keep in there. All right, this happened. This guy, he won this interview. And so we needed to represent him accurately. We needed to represent me accurately, and that involved knowing that I kind of got made a fool of. But
right.
that was like a really pivotal moment in my development in the film.
Right. Well, that's a realization and a turning point in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So to get a little more into the logistics side of things, we were talking earlier about how a lot of these people probably didn't want to be too cooperative, didn't want to do interviews with you and everything, especially the media outlets, and yet you have a lot of footage from a lot of different sources, different media outlets, news stations, ESPN, some HBO, that kind of stuff. I'm surprised that you had so much trouble getting interviews with people, and yet you were able to use all their footage that you wanted. Was there a challenge getting that stuff behind the scenes, or is there some kind of fair use rule you were able to use?
It's fair use, and we've had a really good attorney. I should say though, we've had to take stuff out because our attorney has said, no, you don't have a strong fair use argument for this, and so. It's really important for a documentary filmmaker to have an attorney. It is, if they're planning on using, especially if they're planning on using archival footage, to have an attorney. And one lesson I've learned is that we didn't have our attorney involved from the very beginning, looking at every rough cut, and that became sort of a big pain in the ass because we got to a point where we thought we were done. And then our attorney looks at it and is like, nope, you can't use this footage, you can't use that footage, and so now we've got to change things.
He walked in as an aneurysm and said, all right, let me tell you what we got to change. everything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, fortunately, it wasn't a ton, but it was enough that it was a headache. It really was. It was a headache. It cost extra money because then I had to pay my editors to go back and change things.
And you spend all that time getting these scenes just the way you like them.
Yes.
You're like, what? My favorite scene. What do you mean I got to take out half of it?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you didn't know what the rules were from the beginning.
Exactly, exactly. And so, the final product will still have a lot of footage in it, but that footage, we work with our attorney to make sure that there is a strong fair use argument for that footage. Or in some cases, we did pay, like with still photo. There are a lot of still photos that we paid a licensing fee to get.
Okay.
But all of the video footage that will be in the final version that we make available online and DVD and stuff, that will all be, we'll be claiming fair use for all of that. And and our attorney helped us. In some cases it was just, it's a matter of writing the voiceover a certain way to make it clear that this footage is being held up for scrutiny. Because basically that's what gives you a fair use argument, is if you're taking a piece of material, a piece of the media, something that's out there, and you're saying we need to look at this, we need to analyze this, then you have an argument, that you have a fair argument that you have a right to do that. And
right. Well, the whole thing with fair use is that you're not supposed to be just taking something that someone else did and letting them make your point for you. That's just being lazy and riding someone else's coattails. But if you're taking something and saying, even though this is what they're saying, we want you to think twice about it and what they're saying and why they're saying and how they're saying it. That's not just letting the other person talk for you. That's turning the actual clip into the subject matter, and critiquing other stuff does fall under fair use.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Basically, if you're just using something for cosmetic reasons to make your story look better or whatever, have a fair use argument.
Right. So what are some...
I was going to say, speaking of fair use, because there's a lot of confusion about it, especially with some of the filmmakers that Bob and I have talked to in the past. Aside from fair use, what are some things about Unverified that you learned in the making of it that could be of use to other filmmakers in the area?
Well, I think, related to that, I would say keep a very organized document, a very organized record of anything you may want to use, where you're using it in the film. And frankly, if you can afford it, or if you can get somebody to do it for free, get an archivist or somebody who can function as basically an artist, which is just somebody who is keeping that record of all of your archival stuff, all of your extra assets, and where they are in the film, where they came from, what the original source is, all of that stuff. Have that super organized. And if you can have somebody whose sole job it is to do that, man, do that. It'll save you the headache. And then again, just have your attorney looking at it all along the way. But then also related to that, not just for fair use reasons, but it's good to have an attorney involved from the very beginning, because the attorney can. Especially if you're doing something controversial like my film, the attorney can look at your voiceover, your narration, and say, you should probably change that there, or you might get sued. That kind of thing, where the attorneys can suggest ways of rephrasing things to make it so that you're not liable. You don't want to be liable for law. Now, of course, you should get E&O insurance, and usually you can't get E&O insurance without an attorney's approval. And E&O insurance is covering its errors and omissions, and so it's covering things like this, and it's sort of protection so that if somebody did want to sue, like the E&O insurance would cover that, at least to a point.
Now, is that
but
like if you want to try to get a distributor or something, is that something that they're going to be looking for? Did you get that insurance?
yes, in fact, I think every distributor is going to require E&O insurance.
Okay.
So that's important. And, at least in my experience for documentaries. And so, so I guess, make sure you're budgeting. You should budget for legal fees, and you should budget for E&O insurance. And your legal fees, I think, really should be part of your production budget. Again, because you should get your lawyer involved earlier. We had kind of looked at legal fees as a post-production line item. But in the future, I will put legal fees in production so that I can get my lawyer involved at the very beginning.
Right. That's a good call. Well, that speaking of production fees, that brings me to the last big thing I want to get your opinion on, and that is the Kickstarter you did for this project.
Mm-hmm.
Your Kickstarter goal was $50,000, and you raised $142,000. So I guess I need to start off by saying congratulations on the extra $92,000 in your bank account.
Right. It's long gone, I can say that. It is long gone by this point.
But
and I didn't take it. The other point I need to say is that not take that 92. That is long gone to all the extra expenses. But anyways, go ahead.
Well, I definitely want to talk about how, even when you exceed a goal like that, how that money can still get spent. But to start from the beginning, how, and I'm sure this is something everybody would love to know, how does one have an incredibly successful Kickstarter? Which, congratulations, by the way, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a couple things. One, I was just really lucky, frankly. I don't ever think that I will be in a situation to have that successful of a Kickstarter again. I really doubt that'll ever happen again. It was serendipitous in a way that I just happened to be the right person in the right place at the right time to tell a compelling story. I had a point of view on this story, which was not just a compelling story, but a story with a huge audience, a story that was we're talking about college sports scandal here,
right.
which there's immediately a huge audience of college sports fans who are interested in this story and who have strong opinions about this story.
Most of them Duke fans.
Yeah. Well, in this case, actually, it's NC State fans. It's but we can get into that later.
Oh, those poor State fans.
Yeah,
so do you think some of your success, would you pin isn't quite the right word, but do you think you would attribute that more to the fact that you were dealing with a very topical scandal type issue, something that was hot in the news that people were already paying attention to, or do you think
yes,
attribute it more to the following you had built up with your blog, so people are already aware of you?
Right, it's both. That's what I was going to say. The first thing is that it was topical, but the second thing is that I had built huge following with my blog, which was unexpected. I mean, when I started blogging about this, I wrote one blog entry and I didn't even intend to write another. I had no intentions, no designs to write a second blog entry, but my blog before then was lucky to get 50 hits on a blog entry that I wrote. I mean, it was a boring blog about academic support strategies, strategies to help struggling students. I mean, totally boring for anybody not in the field. But I wrote this blog entry, and it got like 8,000 hits in 2 days.
Did you get reposted somewhere? Did somebody from ESPN tweet about it or something?
It just kind of went viral through the UNC and NC State fan message boards, local sports people. It just went because it just went viral through those communities, and it was, again, it was because I just happened to have this unique perspective that I was able to articulate coherently and persuasively, and it was something different on this very topical issue. And so, but after I wrote that first blog, I thought, well, I do have some more things to say. And so I kept blogging, and my blogs kept getting thousands of hits every time. So I built up this huge audience over the course of a year, so that by the time we launched the Kickstarter, I mean, there were people who knew my work and who were waiting, and so we reached our 50,000 goal in 24 hours.
Oh shit!
Which blew me away. Still, by the way, that blew me away. I mean, I thought, I was confident we'd reach $1,000, but I didn't think we'd reach nearly as much as we did, and I didn't think it'd be 24 hours. Yeah. So the thing that I would say, though, the thing to take away from that for other filmmakers is build your audience ahead of time, or connect with your audience ahead of time. And I can tell you, right, I'm working on a short documentary. It's called Radioactive Veteran. It's about the military's nuclear testing in the 1950s and its consequences for one veteran and his family. And we're going to launch a crowdfunding campaign pretty soon here, and I've been reaching out to veteran advocates specifically, and people who have been interested in like issues surrounding nuclear testing and nuclear weapons, atomic veterans, and that kind of. So I've been trying to reach that audience ahead of time, so that when we drop the crowdfunding campaign, there'll already be people waiting for it, and already people waiting to share it and spread it around. And
right, you got to lay that foundation first.
Yeah, exactly. And I heard there was a panel. I wasn't at Sundance, but every year I always follow what's going on at the Sundance Film Festival. And this year there was a panel discussion with Sundance filmmakers who successfully crowdfunded, and one of them said that before they launched their crowdfunding campaign, they reached out to 500 people with significant social media influence, and to get those people to agree to tweet or Facebook post the campaign the day that it launched. And so so that on that first day, it went out to tens of thousands of people. Right. So that's, and that goes back to, what I did inadvertently with my blog was build that audience, connect with that audience, so that by the time crowdfunding came around, the audience was already ready and already knew it was coming and was ready to contribute and spread the word.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic. So I guess before we wrap it up, as we touched on earlier, I have to go ahead and ask. Obviously, you did not get to pocket the $92,000 and pay off your debts and buy a nice new car. Explain to people how you can triple your Kickstarter goal, and there's still expenses out there.
Well, we $50,000 goal.
You specifically said in the video that those were the initial cost. You thought it would take $50,000 just to get started. So even in the video, you were upfront that $50,000 was not to get this thing completed and on screens.
Yeah, exactly. And we just thought we were going to have to do a whole private fundraising, to get the rest of the funds, because so we budgeted enough to pay me so that I could leave. I left my job to make this film, and we had in the budget enough to pay me the same amount that I made old job every month. My monthly salary for the first 6 months, and so that took me through August. But we didn't budget it. We didn't expect to go until January. And so I didn't get paid anything after August. But I had to pay my crew, still. And so, like, and it gets expensive when you have multiple cinematographers, when you have multiple editors, when you need to pay for color correcting and sound engineering, legal fees, insurance fees. All of these things become really expensive really fast. And
I take it based on what you were saying earlier, you hadn't figured the attorney's fees into that initial $50,000.
No, we were planning on that being a post-production cost, and we had it in the budget. We had it in the original budget, but we've ended up having more legal fees than we anticipated. So it all adds up. We ended up doing a second Kickstarter that we got about $25,000 for, and we also did some private fundraising, and so our whole budget was over $200,000. But now that I know what I'm doing, though, if I took on a project like this again, I could do it for less. In this economy too. Like we've learned things along the way, that I think it really comes down to efficiency. I could be more efficient because the biggest expense really was paying my editors. Not because they're demanding a lot, but I was committed to paying them, them to be able to pay their bills. And the editing process took so much longer than it really should have, but that was because I was a first-time filmmaker trying to direct this thing. And we wanted to make a high production value film. I mean, because we had music. We had composers. Hired the guys from local band Bombadil to do our film score, and they were super awesome. But that was several $1,000s that we spent for music also, and so all of these things add up in a high production film, and that's why. $200,000 seems like a lot, but that's actually still considered a low-budget film.
Well, thanks for taking the time to chat with us. It's really cool to get some behind-the-scenes info on this film. Where to next for you?
So we have a couple more film festivals. We just, by the way, we were awarded Best Documentary at Skyline International Film Festival, which is sponsored by the University of North Georgia. That was really exciting to win that award, and we have the Eastern North Carolina Film Festival coming up. We have the Longley Film Festival coming up. We're also going out to California for the 10-day Riverside International Film Festival just outside of LA, and then the Glass City Film Festival, which is in my hometown of Toledo, Ohio. I'm really excited about that. And then we are hoping come June. Sometime in June, we're hoping to make the film available first on Vimeo on demand, and in addition, we're some more theatrical screenings around the country. We're launching VOD and theatrical at the same time, and we'll do touring with the film around the country, and so yeah, with it being available online, we're hoping to get to a lot more people, because I think a compelling story that people, not just people who are affiliated with UNC or college sports fans, will find compelling. I think that there are some universal themes that appeal to a broad audience, and so we are excited. So check us out on Twitter and Facebook, where we'll be posting updates, and people will be able to find out then for sure when we start taking pre-orders for either DVDs or watching it online, and then make that available hopefully in June.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, where can people go online to find out more about this film?
Really easy, unverifiedthefilm.com.
Unverifiedthefilm.com. Awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Bradley, for taking the time to chat with us. It's been very enlightening. I hope the audience out there has gotten some good tidbits from that. If you ever find yourself needing to make a documentary, get something off your chest, defend your friends, set the record straight on something. So you did a great job, and I hope
Awesome.
I hope everybody goes out and sees it.
Thank you. It was really fun being on here, and yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody out there for watching. This has been another episode of Local Film Talk. I'm Bob Walters, of course, my co-host Conrad Arnold. You can check us both out on social media. Conrad does the Triangle Film Community Twitter account. That's NC Film, right?
Right.
Right. I'm at Paradise Bob on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch all these episodes. It's just a Local Film Talk channel on YouTube. Or you can subscribe to the podcast if you just want to listen to the episode. It's on iTunes. It's a Local Film Talk podcast. So go check us out. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or want to give us any feedback, localfilmtalk@gmail.com. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Bradley, for joining us. And we will see you guys next week.